Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Mana on the Rocks. It is I, Joe. Joining me, as always, Atlas.
Hello, everybody.
This week, we kind of talk about a bunch of different stuff. You know, new year, the tournament season's just about to get started for us. The grind's about to get started for us, and we thought it would be a good idea to kind of talk about our goals. And you know, maybe you're newer to CDH. Maybe you don't know like what's in store for you. Maybe it would help to have like kind of a loose step-by-step process of like what's about to happen. That's largely what we focus on. Much like I need you to focus on these announcements. Atlas, what are we announcementing?
Today, I think our announcements are pretty straightforward. The main things are that we have 2 tournaments coming up. They are on February 10th. This is CEDH 4 up at Laughing Dragon in Issaquah. It's going to be a really cool tournament, well run, going to be a lot of fun. We'll both be there. It'll be a blast. Hopefully we'll see some, if not all of you listeners there. And then we also have the next weekend, the OCCS tournament, which is the Olympic Commander Challenger Series, at our home shop, Gabby's Olympic Cards and Comics in Lacey, Washington. And that will be on February 17th. Like I said, it's going to be a great event, a lot of really good players. We're excited to get into that one as well, and looking forward to having a really good time with that. The only other thing is that I was able to successfully procure a ticket to Punt City 3.
Let's go!
I know, I'm very excited. This will be the first like super large tournament that I've traveled to. So I'm looking forward to that experience, going with a couple of other friends. Unfortunately, Joe was not able to make this one.
Womp.
But hopefully there will be some people who are listening to this going to that as well. And then looking forward to just having some really great games, high-level CEDH play, and learning a lot and having a really different new type of experience.
We're really going to show them that the West Coast is the best coast, baby!
Yeah, well, I wouldn't put too much cocky vibes out there, but we'll definitely try.
I'm just joking.
Just joking. You're just joking.
That's it. That's the one. All right. Well, if that wraps us up for our announcements.
That does indeed.
Excellent. Well, I can't start the episode without shouting out our lucky patron, Justin. Thank you very much for supporting us, my friend. You should come on down and get a drink with us. So, if I were to ask you what your goals are for, I guess, CDH and like Magic in general, what's like the elevator pitch for you?
For my goals, I'm here to win.
I want to win.
I think it's twofold. For me, at least, it's I want to do well. I want to like win games, succeed. I'm playing the game because I enjoy winning, but I'm also playing the game that I want to win because I enjoy the game. And so I think my 2 goals are to have fun and to do well.
So how do you feel? Okay, I guess this is hard to say without just like blatantly saying it. Like, how do you feel going into, I guess, the next quote unquote tournament season, as we've been like jokingly call it? Because I feel like out of all of us, and especially out of the 2 of us, you're the one with the target on your back.
I don't know if there's a target on my back, but I think that there's definitely and you see this with like people all over the place, right? It's like you do well at something somewhere, and suddenly there's a lot of like, you feel, even if there isn't, but you feel like there's a lot of pressure to do well for the next event, and like you have to put up like sort of that same level of results every time, which is really hard when there are a lot of other talented people who are also vying for those same positions, right? Like those same like 1, 2, 3, 4 slots that everyone's trying to get. They're super coveted. It can be a lot of pressure especially if you don't even like, for whatever reason, you don't even make like a semis cut, a top 16 cut. That can be like super duper demoralizing for somebody who's been successful before, especially if like you have a podcast like me, right? It's like, oh, I talk about this shit, and then it's like all of a sudden, well, you aren't you aren't doing super hot, so like why should I listen to you? What's the point of why are you talking?
Exactly, yeah. I think in your position, I it's got to be confusing and weird, right? Just like how to navigate all this and how to manage that, and like trying to keep yourself grounded, but also obviously like you're hungry for victory. The most hungry for victory person I think I've met when it comes to just competition. Like winning is just everything for you. In like I guess in my perspective, it feels like it's healthy. Is it healthy?
I don't know about that. I'm not a person to comment on that, right? But I do think that I think for me it's like I want to win, sure, but I want to win like, and I want it to feel, I want to enjoy the win.
Mm-hmm.
Like I want to have fun playing the game. Like at this point, like one of my, because we're talking about goals this episode, right? So
yeah,
one of, I guess my goal at this point is, other than to like, everyone's goal is at some point to win, right? But I think that my goal right now, my personal objective is to not just like be shooting for the win with everything you got, but like to have fun along the way. So like make sure that you're making those connections with the humans who are playing the cards, and creating an enjoyable environment and experience for everyone, even if like you are stomping or getting stomped in the match, like just doing your best to like be a good sport and have a good time there. And I think that's sort of like where I've ended up, is my goal is to just have fun playing Magic.
What a wholesome answer. I hate it. Disgusting. where's the the showboatery? No, I'm joking. Yeah, I think I can agree with that. I think, towards the like middle third of like last year, it definitely was hard for me to sit down and enjoy the game like properly, like on like a fundamental level. It felt weird for me to be playing Magic. Like I didn't understand it, didn't get it. It just didn't click. And I as a result, like we talked about this a little bit in the burnout episode, but like I did like get a little bit obsessed with like trying to get better. I mean, the amount of times I've talked to you after tournaments and talked about it on here, like just the way that my mental and emotional, I handled it all. I was so consumed with I gotta do better, I gotta perform. These numbers mean everything. And I don't know what changed. I can't really, I can kind of pinpoint what happened, but I don't really know like the switch that flipped in my head that like CDH just got a lot of fun for me. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was trying a different deck, being on Hellcat, and having success with that and seeing what that can do. I feel like every single time I play a game of CDH, I'm having more fun than I've ever had, and I'm playing better than I've ever had.
Yeah, and I think like that's sort of like was my big turning point too over the past year or so, I guess. I mean, like I hit a point where as I was progressing, I hit a point where I was like, yeah, I want to win, I need to succeed, I have to do good, I have to like win these tournaments, I have to like win every game that I'm playing, blah blah blah. And I still want to do that, but I think my goal has shifted away from like being that to win every single game and to do super well, because I know that I'm capable of winning games and playing well, placing well in tournaments and things. So now my goal is to have fun while I'm doing it, so it feels less of a chore, so that I'm making sure that I don't burn myself out and I'm still enjoying the game, because that's why I wanted to do well in the first place, is that I was enjoying the game.
Yeah, I'll keep circling back to it because I think it's a point that's always going to bear repeating. Even though we're competitively minded, even though we both grind tournaments, even though we do like winning and winning feels really good, I think just making sure that you are, having a good time with the people around you. You're making friends along the way. You're enjoying, going to all these places. I mean, I look back on all the events we did last year, and just God, we went everywhere, dude. We went to so many. You more so than me, but we were all over the place. We went to so many places, and we had just a lot. Like, despite my feelings on the tournaments, the trips that we went on, and just going to these events and meeting these people and seeing these sites, like that was like the highlight of last year, and why I'm very excited for this year to see where everything takes us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we kind of like outline like our general like thoughts and like opinions for like, I guess, our goals. How would one go about like setting their own goal? Like say you're one to start fresh this year. Like how does how does that look like for someone who wants to start going to tournaments and start competing?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with like you have to start with self-reflection, right? And figure out sort of where you are as a player and what you are aiming to get out of the tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
I think once you figure out what you want from playing Magic and what you want in competing in tournaments, like what you want to get from those things, that will really help you figure out what your goal needs to be, and then like setting some realistic like benchmarks and milestones, like things that you can work towards to achieve that.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I can agree with that, because I think everyone's gonna. I have yet to meet someone who's like, yeah, I just started playing Magic and I started playing CDH. I feel like everyone that I've met, that plays CDH has been like, oh yeah, I started playing, like X amount of time ago, like a little bit. Like there's usually some amount of like lead up into like CDH. Very rarely do I think I've met people that just jump right in, because it's so daunting. There's so much going on. When you sit at a table, there is so much just knowledge that you just need before you even shuffle up. Like just seeing 3 to I guess 6 different commanders, 3 different opponents, I guess, and trying to understand what all of them do, like just intuitively, that in and of itself is such a huge, like, I guess, skill hurdle, skill check, whatever you want to call it, right? Where where you are is going to matter entirely, and how much of the fire hose have you started drinking about CDH, because I feel like that's probably step 1, I would say, is like once you start playing, is like, okay, there's a wealth of knowledge and information out there that is not required reading, but it's certainly going to help you.
Yeah, there's, aside from all that reading, like there's forums to troll, there's you can like ask questions in different discords and things, but yeah, it really, like you said, it is a fire hose. There's just such a wealth of content to consume, whether it's podcasts or like actual articles that have been written by like professional Magic players, or like other content creators or something like that. There's just so much to gameplay videos from YouTube. There's so many things to look at and so much to try and consume. Like when you are new, it really starts to get overwhelming very quickly. I mean, just as simple as just like, what deck do you want to play? What colors do you want to play? For the issues that I have with the database, I do think the database is a good starting point for someone who is getting their feet wet into CDH, just to see what decks look like. It just gives you a starting point, right?
Yeah, it gives you a solid starting point. You can look through and be like, okay, what does blue farm do? I keep hearing this blue farm. What does this deck do exactly? And at least for me, every single time I dive into like a new format, or like I take a break from any card game, that's always like the fun part for me, is just like the discovery phase of just like, what is everyone doing? What have I missed? What are the best things that the collective consciousness has deemed to be the most successful thing, and what has splintered around it. And the database is so good at that. Everyone's going to have their fringe tech, and like regions are going to vary. But for the most part, like being able to sit down in a pod and identify that, like Mardu is turbo, that Thrasios decks are more often than not going to be able to play a control game or a fast game, depending on how it's built in the pilot. Knowing what the 5 color decks do, being able to suss out like the weirder like 3 color decks, and like their weird synergy pieces. Just being able to cultivate that intuition, so that way when you do sit down, you're not walking in as blind. You're still gonna have moments where you walk in blind. I have those all the time, I know that. But having that baseline knowledge is so helpful. And I will still recommend, at least for new players, just to go through the database. If you've heard about a deck because you have started watching content, because you have started listening to podcasts, reading articles, Discord servers, like all of those things, that's kind of the next step, is like, what do these decks do? And all the decks in the database all have pretty thorough primers to sift through, so they'll break everything down for you.
Yeah, I think there are some exceptions to that. Like some of the decks on there don't have, I think there are like 2 or 3 that I've seen at least, that their primers are like a picture or something. That's not very helpful, but
yeah, but
For the most part, yeah.
For the most part, like the heavy hitters, you know, your Nagilas, your Kenriths, your Blue Farms, your Thrasios X decks, like all of those are going to be like pretty well fleshed out. So you can start to gauge what those decks are doing, and then from there, you know, maybe okay, so we've entered the format, we start playing, we have kind of like a rudimentary like baseline knowledge of what CDH does. Now comes the difficult part. What are you playing?
Yeah, that's always a challenge, right? Like, because sometimes you want to try a new deck, and like then you like have to find new cards and figure out what works for your meta, and that is the hard part.
Yeah. And that's a daunting challenge. Yeah, and honestly, for me, it's always as simple as like, well, what colors do you like playing? And that's, I feel like one of the easier and more difficult question. It's somehow the easiest question to ask, and also the most difficult question to answer, because you can play every color combination, and there's some niche that it can fill. There's something that it can do.
Yeah, they will be at the very least like viable. There will be at least one viable deck in your combination of colors. Does that mean that it's going to like consistently pop off and be very good at like taking down tournaments? No,
Probably not. Probably not.
But like it gives you a starting point where, hey, I like this, and then you play that deck and you're like, okay, I'm not winning a lot of games. Maybe I should try changing decks. You take something new on, play that deck for a little bit. All right, I've liked this. I'm gonna go back to my other thing, and like you take the lessons that you've learned from that other deck, you can now apply it to the one that you started with. Like if you're trying to make Boros good, but you don't want to play Winota or whatever, so you pick a different Boros commander. You're like, well, I spent like a month and a half playing Turbo-Nas. Like, what did I learn about what makes those decks good? How do I take lessons and extrapolate them to this deck?
Yeah, and there's bits and pieces that I feel like you can pull from every deck that you play. I mean, I, for the longest time, wasn't playing blue, and I've gotten really good at playing against blue. So now that I have started playing blue recently, it's become easier to kind of like sense those patterns. There are things that you can pull from everything and put towards everything. And I think just kind of shopping around, just trying a bunch of different lists, trying a bunch of very different lists, especially lists that operate at very different speeds. You know, like playing like a stacks list is going to be, you're going to have to play and think very differently from if you're playing like a turbo strategy or a mid-range strategy, or like one of the weird like slices that fall in between those three like archetypes. And from there, you can kind of start piecing it together. And then I guess the next point after you start piecing it together is, well, you got to start brewing a little bit. At least for me, that's kind of how you start getting into like, I guess, the mechanics of how a format really, really operates. You know, you have your quote unquote set of good cards, and the good cards, the staples, are tenuous. I think for some people it makes deck building really, really easy because you don't have to think. You only have like, you know, what, 10, 20 slots maybe at most, depending on your colors, right?
Yeah, it feels like that number of flex slots gets smaller every year because there are just so many good cards that are printed.
Yeah. But also it means that you can start, you start going through the card evaluation. We've talked about this a lot. Where you go, is this card actually good in my deck? The cards that make infinite mana are going to function different, and you're going to be looking for very different things, whether you're playing, I don't know, like Timna Jeska or like a Thrasios deck. Both decks are going to be looking to make infinite mana, but they're going to be doing it in very drastically different ways. And then you also have like random commanders that like have very, very powerful like one card effects that are just win cons all in itself. The classic example is Kinnan Basalt Monolith. That is Basalt Monolith, not a widely played card in CDH. But what it is, it's usually up to some sort of shenanigans.
Yeah, like a power artifact or something like that, right? And then you usually have like a mana sink on your commander or whatever it happens to be. Yeah,
and because you have that baseline knowledge of like, oh, this is what these decks do, and these are like all the good cards, now we start cobbling it together, and we have a couple slots. Well, what do we do with these? Do we actually want the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th removal spell? Do we need to start scraping the bottom of the barrel for tutors and stuff like that, and start experimenting and start going through the motions, as it were. I like brewing a lot. Brewing is a lot of fun. I think that's where I have found a lot more of my like strengths in CDH is being able to just dissect a list pretty efficiently and like go through card by card and be like, okay, all these are the good cards, all these are the weirdo cards, and like identifying and asking the questions of like, why is this here? Why isn't this here? Where can we make this? How do we make these changes?
Just
That's
thoroughly breaking it down.
yeah, really just breaking it down. And that's a great skill to work on. I feel like is a very very critical part for the CDH players like Path.
Yeah, I think so. Is that like so? Is that something that you're trying to focus on this year then, or like is like
so.
brewing a new list or like dissecting your lists more diligently and making sure that everything like has the spot that it's earned?
I think I should I should be brewing more than I am. I know that I've kind of fallen off the brew bandwagon a little bit as I've just kind of like dug myself into my own little like holes, as it were, and like just focusing on my own list. I haven't really done a lot of like trying out like different commanders recently and like brewing up different lists and seeing how they function and whatnot. But it's definitely something that I want to get back to doing because I do like brewing. I do like deck building a lot. Nothing's come across my plate that I've been interested in brewing with, apart from like the decks that I'm already playing and already liking, just kind of effortlessly tinkering over.
No, I get that. For me, it's been kind of just one of those things, just trying to optimize my one deck that I play at this point, right?
Basically,
yeah, I've messed with a couple of other things recently, but nothing really scratches that same itch. I was playing a game earlier today, and they were telling me how I just didn't look like I was having fun because I was playing Esper as opposed to 5-color. It's like, yeah, kind of.
That does seem to be the problem with 5-color, right? Is like once you get used to 5-color, it's so hard to go below 5 colors.
Yeah, or just like not even that, because like I've played other 5-color decks not recently, but other 4 and 5-color decks as well, and it's always just like this deck just doesn't keep my interest. Doesn't seem flexible. I like toolboxes.
I'm also a big toolbox player, but I feel like me and you toolbox very very differently.
Yeah.
Or
yes,
like you,
for sure.
Where you're trying to toolbox all the time, and I'm trying to just land my cool thing and be able to toolbox and just pivot around to completely different strategies all over the place. Where you're like, no, all my cards need to be able to do everything. And I'm like, no, these weirdo cards are going to handle everything for me. I'm going to be able to access them from any point in the game, and these weirdo cards are going to rule everything.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. What would be the next step after we've started figuring out a deck. We have some knowledge. We have we have an idea of how to brew. What would you think is the next step along this path?
Ooh, that is a really good question. I think that like after you've taken your deck, you're like, okay, I sort of know how to brew. I think at that point you just need skill and information at that point, right? You need to play as many games as possible, sort of like with the established mold of whatever, like of the source that is telling you how to play the game. Like if you're net decking your list, just play that like as much as you can, and then you can come back like once you have that sort of like experience to shape your opinions and be like, okay, now that I like sort of understand that this connects to that and like this card is good and here's why, now I can start saying that like this card that everyone's talking about all the time, not good.
You start getting jaded is what we're saying.
You start getting jaded. You're like, oh, that's when you get to the, hey, Thoracle, I don't know if I want to play that.
It does feel like a revelation. Like I feel like you know the meme of like the guy is on a fork. He's at a fork in the road, and there's like this dark, gloomy castle, and there's like this happy sunshine place. It's kind of like that. It's like either you choose you choose whether you like Thoracle, or you go, this is the worst card I've ever seen in my entire life. People play this garbage? Nonsense.
So, I mean, like, the thing is, like, Thoracle's not even that bad. It's just a mana consultation.
It's just consultation. Oh, God. I told you about one of my games last week, right, with Consult, right?
I don't know if you did.
Yeah, okay. Context for the story. We were playing this was a tournament game. This is in our local tournament, and our boy Peter... he's trying to get something going. He has some pretty good cards in hand, and he cast Demonic Consultation with nothing else going on. So our immediate reaction as the table, we're like, okay, so either he's consulting for like Thoracle or something, and he's got Tainted Pact to finish it out, or he just has like Thoracle in hand and console clear the library, cast Thoracle and win. And as we're talking, Peter, our boy Peter goes, no, I'm not gonna Thoracle here. We're like, oh, okay, that's fine. Resolve your consultation. Names Displacer Kitten. Exiles his top 6. Kitten wasn't there. We're off to the races. 2 cards later, Thoracle. Devastating. Absolutely devastating. And the cards keep going. They keep flipping. And maybe halfway through the deck, his face changes from happy to oh god, just absolute despair. And I make a comment of this is why I can't play this card anymore. This card you will just cast this card and just sometimes this happens. Or you just go, yep, I can only cast this card in context with Thoracle, at which point it's kind of a dead card because it has to be live with another card.
Yeah, if the card says I can only play this in conjunction with another, I'm only allowed to cast this card when I'm losing the game and there are no other options, or when I'm winning the game. If I have this other card in my hand, the card is not good in my opinion.
And this card resolves, and there's ETB effects, and I'm not going to get got by a random draw effect.
Yeah, just so many conditions.
It's a lot of conditions. It's really funny because as someone who played like the baby pod, there's a lot of check marks that I have to mentally tick off. Okay, is the grave clear? Can I tutor? Are creatures good? Are ETBs good? All of those things. But somehow I feel like you can prepare for those things, whereas and recover from them. With consult, if you whiff the consult, or the consult's bad, or someone just has the the perfect answer for you, the endurance, the turn, the earth, the noxious, the whatever, it's just that's it. You're just out of the game. You have no recovery.
Yeah, and so I think that's one of the things for new players is just realizing that sometimes the things that you've just to be good are just your mind changes and you say, oh wait, I actually really don't like this card. Because I know we would play for a while, a couple years back, we'd be there was a solid period where it's oh man, yeah, Thoracle's so broken, blah 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 blah. Everyone's doing the Thoracle thing, and then eventually we play more, and our opinion starts to shift. We're going, hey, I don't know if this card's all that good because everyone keeps killing me when I cast it.
Yeah, or everyone seems to have the perfect answer for it. Actually, this is a good segue into the next step. So we're talking about earning your skill, honing your craft, and whatnot. The metagame, learning to assess the metagame.
That's so hard. So hard.
Yeah, when it's so difficult. But also there's a few key differences when it comes to the CEDH metagame, and we've talked about this a bunch, so I'm not gonna spend forever on it. But a lot of the time, it comes down to the cards in your deck, not necessarily the deck that you're playing. The deck that you're playing is going to inform a decent amount, but for the most part, so long as you can identify the big key threats of the format, you can kind of narrow in from there. So, knowing that you should never let a breach resolve, you should never let an ad nauseam resolve, you should know what happens when Thoracle is starting to get mentioned. I would say those are the big things to really you can get got by them a couple of times, but eventually you start to learn oh, these are the cards that everyone is kind of piling their decks around. And when a lot of people start piling their decks around these things, you start to get a metagame going. You start to go, okay, well, is this the best thing? How do I counter the best thing? Is there a next best thing? How does this fit into whatever shell that I'm doing? How does this fit with my game plan? Is there better win cons for my game plan?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the step after that even is then knowing okay, so here are the hard and fast rules. Here are the conditions under which we break the hard and fast rules. There are times when you let a Thoracle resolve. You're oh, okay, someone's casting Thassa's Oracle, and I know they have consult in their hand. I'm gonna let them resolve that and their consultation, knowing that you can kill them in response because it's just easier to have them out of the game. Or knowing that oh, maybe I'm going to let their consult resolve, but I'm not going to kill them. I'm going to tell them that I'm able to kill them, and here's how, after the consult is resolving, but before they name the card, so that I can be hey, you don't actually want to you don't want a consult to try to win here, because then I will kill you and you will lose. Instead, here's the card that you should name, or consider getting a card that's not that, so you don't die, and maybe you can stay in the game because it's more useful to have them around still, but you don't want them winning the game.
Relevant stacks, piece, known information, these kinds of things.
Yeah, you're consult, yeah, that resolves. Before you name your card, I'll just remind you that I'm holding an endurance right now. you probably shouldn't try to go for it because I'm gonna blow you out.
Yeah.
Like that type of thing.
I'm gonna send you back to the Stone Age is what I'm
To
gonna
the
do to you.
Stone Ages. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a huge that's a huge discussion in and of itself. Knowing like I think that specific Thoracle interaction is such a huge learning point for a lot of players because like even without like saying, oh, just I'll pass priority, but just so you know, I have like the endurance, like just being like, yeah, dude, it resolves. The amount of times that I just look at people and go, yeah, consult resolves. Name your card, and people just start sweating. It's like, oh no, they have something for this.
Yeah.
What is it? What could it be? What do I name? Do I actually clear my deck? Do I try and gamble and see what I can get off of this consult?
Are they messing with me, or do they have it?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so the metagame of Cedh is difficult. It's very, very difficult just because quote unquote everything is quote unquote playable. In terms of like the broad stroke archetypes of the of Magic: The Gathering.
Yeah, you've got your aggro decks, you've got your control decks, you've got your mid-range tempo. Like there are all these things. They just look a little different. Like, and that's another thing is like getting used to identifying like different commanders and what they do. Mm. Oh, I think that's a step that I would probably put in front of like learning the meta game is just like learning how to identify people's general deck strategies just from seeing their commander and the colors they're playing. I think that's what I would put before the meta game. It's just like you have to be able to sit down and be like, oh, this person's playing black, so they're on Thoracle, so they're probably playing a little bit more like aggressively slanted list, but they don't have a lot of protection. So it's probably gonna be aggressively slanted, but like with a fair amount of counter spells and like interaction. So I got to think about that when I'm like taking my mulligans and stuff.
Yeah, you actually kind of answer the question I was about to ask at the same time. Like, what does that process look like for you?
Yeah.
Of breaking that down when you sit down at a table and you see a deck that you're like maybe not like super duper familiar with.
Usually for me, like it's like a lot of if I see a commander and I don't recognize it immediately and know, okay, this is the strategy or the one card combo with it or whatever, I usually look at its color identity and say, okay, these are the main win cons that they can be playing. Look for any like strange like blocks of text that are super like relevant looking. Like if a card says all of your this creature does something, right? All of your this like typed creature.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think the card exists, but you could be like all of your warriors have like sacrifice them, do this thing. Then you can be like, okay, so this deck's going to focus on warrior synergies and using this ability to accomplish an effect. Or like if someone's in blue-black, you're like, okay, so they're on Thoracle console by default, unless that like assumption it gets dispelled later by the players. Like, oh yeah, I'm not playing console, I'm not playing Thoracle. Like those are the things that I look at and I assume first. If it's like red, I'm like, oh, this deck's really fast. Like looking at those types of things, and then if it is a fringe commander, usually assuming that their commander provides some sort of value outside of just the colors, because otherwise they'd be playing a more well-known, better commander. Be like, okay, so they have some sort of like janky synergy. They're gonna resolve their commander. They're gonna like get ignored because no one knows what their commander does, and then we're gonna lose the game to some sort of weird 4-card combo or like some obscure 12 mana combo or something like that. That is just like really inefficient, but nobody's aware of, right? And so like that's the thing that's honestly when I sit down at a table outside of like Blue Farm or Kinnan or something like that, where it's like these are like the top tier decks. Those are the things that I worry about. It's like, oh, these are the top tier decks. I'm really worried about you guys. Those are like the mid tier decks, the tier B, whatever. Like those decks are obviously still a threat, but I'm less concerned about you because I kind of know what your deck does, and I kind of like know how to answer it. I get the most scared about, other than like the S tier decks, I get the most scared about those decks that are like, what is your commander doing again? Because why are you sitting here across from me?
I sit down. Oh, I've never seen your commander before. Kind of glance through it. Oh, that's kind of cool. They play one weird card that you have to read for the first time or like reread because it's been a while, and you go, oh, that's cool. Wait a minute. What does your commander do? Oh, yeah, that's what's happening here. That like realization moment. the moment where you realize, oh no, they actually came to play is what's happening. Yeah, I would say I go through like a pretty similar process, although for me, I'm always gauging like what their interaction is, and like maybe trying to like suss out and like figure out like what staples they're on. Like if we're on like, I don't know, like some Abzan deck, like some like this deck that no one's ever heard of called Tayam, you know, and no one's ever heard of this guy. It does literally
What does that card do?
You know, a lot of weirdo cards in there. But even, you know, you can try and take the weirdo cards step by step because it's really hard to, I guess, prepare and expect for what's about to happen just because you don't know what Tayam does. You've never seen this deck before. It plays a lot of weird cards that say put counters on things. What's a money counter? There's money counters in this game? That's crazy. And you start going, okay, well, what kind of staples can they play? Okay, so we're working with, you know, white, black, green. So we're probably playing, you know, all the green tutors, all the evolution effects, all the vamp tutors, all the demonic tutors, all those things. You know, we you know, they have access to the white, so they're gonna have access to kind of, you know, the best removal suite in the game. No counter spells, obviously, and you know, you kind of branch from there, and you kind of form your game plan, kind of nestled between what they're trying to do and like maybe the weak points in like either their color identity or like the kind of strategy that they're employing. I can't really think of a deck that like can't play like generic like interactive spells. I guess if you have like Gigantha in the command zone, you can't play like Force of Will. It's like the most relevant thing, Force of Negation. It's like the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's the only thing I can think of as well off the top of my head.
Yeah, and then, you know, from there, I try and just, you know, okay, does my game plan line up with this? Do I think that they have the necessary tools or ability to pivot into, like, you know, a beatdown plan, to deal through, or to grind through, like, a stacked out board, to, you know, put up enough interaction to try and stop, you know, someone's storm attempts? You know, can they fight those things? Are they powerless against them? Those kind of like broad questions are usually like what I ask myself whenever I see a deck that I just don't know.
Yeah, and I think like a lot of times you just ask the player, be like, hey,
oh yeah,
like, you play Force of Will, right? They're like, oh no, I'm running Gigantha the companion slot. It's double blue pipped. I can't. You'll go, oh no.
You just put your head in your hands and like, oh god, I had to tap out for this one ring. We're dying right now. So asking the player, huh? That's something that I typically don't do in my 1v1 Magic. Yeah, politics. That I think is probably like, I don't know, to me it feels like the end game for CEDH.
Just learning how to politic, when to politic.
Yeah, just because it employs and requires you to use a lot of skills that are not required by game mechanics for you to be able to accomplish and excel in. Because it's a little bit about the game, but it's also like it tests you as like a social person, as a social being, how well you can interact and communicate with your table, to one, find out what they're doing, try and suss out their information, while also concealing your own game plan, but also like making sure that you can curry favor where you need to curry favor.
Yeah, and that's, I think, like one of the, like you said, the end game. That's like the hardest thing to learn is,
oh yeah,
how do I interact here? Why do I do this? When do I do this? Type deal. Like that's the sort of thing where it's like you start off low and you're like the low powers or whatever, blah blah blah, and then you go where you're making deals. You're like, oh yeah, if you attack me, I'll block with this, and we can both like draw a card because it dies or something. Or like, don't attack me, or I'm gonna kill your guy, type deal. And then like, or don't attack me for 3 turns, and I'll do this for you, type thing. And then you get like CEDH,
command zone
like,
special.
Okay, yeah, the command zone special. And then you get just like CEDH, and you're like, okay, well, everyone's playing super cutthroat, not really like, don't really make deals anymore, blah 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 blah. And it's like, yes, you make deals less for sure. That's not really like an intrinsic part of the game. But then you hit that super high point where you're like, you progress towards the end where you're like, okay, guys, here's what's gonna happen in 3 turns. We all know this is gonna happen in 3 turns. Here's how we stop it. I'm gonna do this. When I do this, that means you have to do that, okay? If you do that, this gets avoided, and we both come out on top, and that person gets hecked over. And we both want them to get hecked over. Or like you said, currying favor. You're like, oh yeah, you're at 4 life. Well, I don't really want you to die right now, so yes, if you attack me with your Timnum, I'll block with my 1/4. You can gain 2 life. I'll take no damage because it's literally no skin off my back. That type of thing is like, I feel like that's sort of like when you get to the really high levels, you're like, yeah, this seems fine. Like you can hit me, I'll block it like favorably for you. Like that's sort of where I see that like the end of that evolution sort of getting towards with coming into CDH and like as a new player like learning all of these different things.
And yeah, it's because it's entirely different like set of skills, an entirely different muscle that you have to flex in your game. Because sure, you can be the best cardboard slinger around, but if you don't know how to communicate to your table, we've talked about this a lot, and so we don't really need to like rest on this point a lot, but you're just leaving advantage on the table at the end of the day is what it matters. And if and if this kind of like pathway guide whatever is to how does one kind of go through the progression of like becoming a better CDH player, like that is something that you're gonna have to rankle with. And this is kind of the beautiful thing to me, and one that I've really only kind of had the realization of recently, the past like few weeks, is everyone's going to come to their own conclusion, and everyone's conclusion, so long as you can reach that conclusion, is going to be effective in its own way. I feel like I kind of like rediscovered personality in a sort of way, but I think being able to express that personality, and that's part of the reason why everyone likes Commander, is you get to express your personality, because you don't need to be I don't know, like silver tongue trickster is what comes to mind, but that doesn't feel like accurate. Or like like super cutthroaty, or like super like table policey, or like like knowledge vomiting. Like you don't need to go to those things. You can kind of play to your own strengths and your own social ups and downs, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think like so after you hit politics, I think like that's sort of like that's that Maslow's hierarchy thing, right? You're like that self-actualization point where, well, now that you know like the basic skills, now you have to like try setting goals for yourself and like how can you grow as a player. And that's sort of like where I think where we've kind of gotten to is like we've sort of got the basic skills under our belts right now. So now we're trying to like set goals for ourselves and be like, okay, well now that I'm doing like okay, or like now that I'm succeeding at deck building or whatever it is, like how do I become better? What do I want out of the game? Right?
So yeah,
so what do you want out of the game?
Yeah, so what do you want out of the game? I don't know. I think, and this is kind of where I feel like I'm at in my CDH journey, is like, well, what do I've kind of risen through my ranks. I've put in my time. I've grinded what I needed to grind and figure out what I need to figure out. what am I ultimately here for? And I think kind of at the beginning of the episode, we kind of talked about like our overarching like goals. I think I am here to just put everything on the table. Not necessarily in like a turbo way, but I'm looking to play my heart out. I'm looking to sit down, be met with a hard game, but one that I know that I am ultimately worthy of fighting in and putting everything out there. So that way, when I walk away, I can say, dude, that was sick that you did that. Like, how did you like manage to do that? Like being able to dissect the game and being able to, discuss those and being able to understand and, being able to, return those in kind, and have those games that, aren't just steamrolls one way or another. No, someone played a fish turn 1 and seat 3 fed like 5 cards to it. They paid for the fish for 3 turns and they just won the game. Like,
yeah.
Like
frustrating snooze fest
that I don't need to be here for. That's not interesting. CDH is such a dynamic format, both in the players and in the cardboard, that it's my goal to make sure that I can come out of every game with just something to say about it. And knowing that I put everything out there that I possibly could have.
Yes, absolutely.
It's almost similar to what you're looking for in a sense, but just my own way.
No, I agree.
Well, what's next for you then? I guess Atlas, if that's what you ask me.
like I said, I think that for me, I'm just trying to figure out that healthy balance of like I'm trying to win, I'm trying to succeed, but also I really just want to play good, high quality games of Magic and have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I meet people. I want to enjoy the experience, which I do. But like that's sort of like that's my goal for the coming year, is to do well and also enjoy the experience, because I know there were times last year for sure where I was like really frustrated, whether it was with myself or others or just like the game in general, and I don't want to experience that, but I still want to like have that same, put that same amount of effort, and still want to like win like the majority of my games or a lot of my games the same way I wanted that last year. And so I think that's what's next for me. It's like, as far as that things goes, like just like continue to try my hardest, and also like have even more fun than I did before. Like realizing that it's just a game, even if there like you feel like there's pressure or something.
It's just a game.
It's just a game.
Why you have to be mad? It's only game.
It is only a game.
I feel like I heard that at like a young age on the internet, and I went, yeah, it's only game. Why you have to be mad? No, why you have to be mad? the hockey player, dude. I love that video. Love that clip. All right, well, I think we've reached the end of our journey here at Mana on the Rocks for this episode. Atlas, thank you for taking this journey with me today.
It's been a pleasure. I will continue on our Magic journeys together.
We absolutely will. So long as you all continue to have a good one, and we'll catch you next time.